You wake up one morning and realize your entire life feels like a poorly tailored Halloween costume, one of those cheap polyester ones with an itchy neck and a plastic mask that smells like a tire fire. You go to brush your teeth, and even your reflection seems skeptical. The toothpaste tastes off. Not because the brand changed, because you changed. See, when you're spiritually awakening, it doesn't feel like floating on a cloud or hugging a crystal under a full moon. It feels like being dropped into a play mid-scene where everyone else knows their lines, and you're standing center stage dressed as a hot dog. Welcome to the first sign your old life feels like a costume. You begin to sense it in small, almost petty ways. Your favorite show suddenly feels hollow. The group chat makes you feel like you're speaking through gauze. Even your go-to comfort foods, meh. Mac and cheese turns into a bowl of dairy-based despair. You start questioning every little habit you once did on autopilot. Why do I scroll TikTok for 3 hours? Why do I always say I'm fine when I'm clearly unraveling like a dollar store sweater? Why did I spend $200 on skincare just to emotionally collapse in front of a ring light? Here's the kicker. This isn't burnout. It's not depression. It's disidentification. You're slowly separating from the identity you built to survive your environment, and it's as beautiful as it is horrifying. Carl Jung called this stage the dissolution of the persona. He once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." Which sounds inspiring until you realize you have no idea who that even is. You've been the ambitious one, the nice girl, the funny guy, the reliable martyr, and now those archetypes just don't fit. It's like you've spent years curating a museum of yourself, only to realize you accidentally built a wax figure of someone you don't even like. You start noticing your inner monologue has changed. Instead of cheering you on, it's muttering things like, "Wait, why are we doing this again?" Or, "If we died right now, would this Slack meeting be the last thing our soul remembers?" You laugh it off until you realize the part of you asking those questions isn't broken. It's waking up, but no one tells you that spiritual awakening makes you bad at parties. Suddenly, small talk feels like a hostage negotiation. You look at someone raving about their new productivity app and think, "We're all gonna die someday, Janet." You're not being edgy, you're just painfully aware of how surface level most conversations are. The existential nausea becomes your new cologne. It lingers. And let's not ignore how jarringly absurd your normal life now seems. You start to notice the performative masks people wear, and the fact that you used to wear them too. Your LinkedIn profile feels like a resume for a character in a cartoon. Your friendships feel like reruns of a sitcom that stopped being funny 5 seasons ago. Even your dreams start whispering, "This is not it." Historians still argue whether the modern self-awareness epidemic is the result of mass disconnection or a spontaneous spiritual evolution. Maybe it's both. Maybe we were so busy selling ourselves that we forgot to meet ourselves. And when we finally do, it's like meeting your roommate of 30 years and realizing he's been quietly screaming in the closet this whole time. Here's where the dark humor creeps in. You think awakening is about becoming enlightened, but no, it's about becoming deeply inconvenienced. You can't pretend anymore. You can't fake the laugh, the interest, the alignment. Your body rebels. Your soul files a formal complaint. And your calendar still has Susan's baby shower on it. You start to withdraw, not because you're antisocial, but because the noise outside is louder than your still, small voice inside. You stop doing things for approval. You start doing things for peace, and that makes you weird. Enlightened, sure, but like the kind of enlightened that means you now cry during insurance commercials because they'd remind you of how fragile connection is. Jung warned us, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. But you're not avoiding anymore. You're squinting at it in the mirror at 2 a.m., wondering why your spiritual awakening came with joint pain, an inexplicable hatred of group chats, and a sudden fascination with monastic silence. But this isn't regression, it's integration. And yes, it's lonely. You might be shedding friendships like snakeskin, but consider this, maybe those relationships were built on who you pretended to be. Maybe the awkward silence you now feel around others isn't you being broken, it's the space between the false self dissolving and the real self emerging. So what do you do when your old life starts feeling like a haunted museum gift shop? You pause. You stop trying to fix yourself and start getting curious. You journal not to be productive, but to meet the stranger who's been hiding beneath the performance. You start making micro decisions based on alignment, not obligation. You let go of people who make your soul feel like it's being held underwater. And you get very, very comfortable with saying, "I don't know," and meaning it. Because you don't. And that's the whole point. So now that you've ripped off the polyester costume and set fire to your emotional LinkedIn profile, what comes next? Welcome to the existential cringe. You know that weird, slippery discomfort you get when watching old videos of yourself trying to be cool in 2009? That stomach-turning blend of shame, nostalgia, and wanting to disappear into a throw pillow? That's what spiritual awakening feels like, except it's not just your past, it's everything. Your thoughts, your beliefs, your goals, your job, even your favorite Spotify playlist, all suddenly sound like they were curated by someone who didn't really know you, because they weren't. They knew the mask, and now here you are, sitting in your own skin like it's rented, having a spiritual identity crisis in aisle 7 of Target, because you just realized nothing you used to care about feels real anymore. Welcome to sign number 2, you're drowning in existential cringe. You feel unmoored, detached, like a Sims character whose player walked away to make a sandwich mid-game. Nothing quite adds up. You might catch yourself zoning out while someone's talking, not because you don't care, but because your brain is too busy screaming, "What even is this reality?" Congratulations, you are now fluent in the language of metaphysical dread. Carl Jung described this as the night sea journey, the plunge into the unconscious where meaning goes to drown before being reborn. He said, enlightenment is not imagining figures of light, but making the darkness conscious. In modern terms, it's not about glowing up, it's about throwing up your illusions. And yes, it's messy. You swing between two moods. Everything is meaningless, so why bother? Everything is sacred. I must protect the moss. You sit in your car after a long day, hands gripping the wheel, staring into the void of the dashboard. You feel like you're on the brink of understanding everything, and also about to cry because your barista spelled your name wrong for the 5th time. Again, not because of the name, because nothing feels real anymore. And if nothing's real, then who are you? The debates rage on. Historians still argue whether this collapse of meaning is a symptom of modern overstimulation or a natural evolution in spiritual maturity. Is it disillusionment? Or is it the soul removing its training wheels? Either way, the transformation comes with strange symptoms. You become both deeply sensitive and completely numb. You cry when you see an old man helping a child cross the street, then spend the next 3 hours staring blankly at your wall, wondering if time is even real. You stop relating to your old ambitions. Your 5-year plan now feels like a eulogy written by your ego. And you're in a dialogue. It turns into that awkward dinner guest who says things like, "You spent 6 years in school for this. Wow, this latte costs more than your sense of identity. If you disappeared tomorrow, would anyone even really notice?" Dark, yes, but it's not trying to destroy you, it's trying to wake you up. This isn't depression, though it may cosplay as it. This is existential detox. You're puking up the stories you were fed about what matters, the capitalist scripts, the parental projections, the algorithm-approved dreams, and when you finally unclog the spiritual drain, you realize half your personality was just inherited trauma dressed up in ambition. Here's your dark humor punch in the gut. You thought you were building a life, but you were actually just speed-running capitalism with a trauma filter. Oops. And now? Now you feel like you're floating above it all. Not better than others, just detached. Like you can see the puppet strings, and you're suddenly less interested in the puppet show. You might stop chasing things, money, prestige, even romance, because you're beginning to realize you were never actually chasing those things. You were chasing validation, belonging, proof that you were real. But realness doesn't come from applause. It comes from alignment, and alignment often means shedding 90% of the things you used to think made you worthy. This is where most people panic and try to fix it. They pick up new obsessions, spiritual TikTok, astrology apps, breathwork cults, ayahuasca retreats led by a guy named Craig. But underneath it all, they're still just trying to escape the void rather than sit in it. But here's the radical suggestion: sit in it. Let it ache. Let the walls melt. Let the mask rot in the corner. Because underneath the existential cringe is something else, the beginning of authentic desire. What do you want? Not for show, not for status, but for your soul. Silence starts to feel different now. It used to be something you avoided. Now it's something you seek. You're less interested in being seen and more interested in seeing, not just the surface, but the depth, the patterns, the wounds, the why. You may even start having strange moments of clarity, like spiritual pop-up ads. You realize your chronic busyness was a form of emotional evasion. You see how your helpfulness was a manipulation for love. You understand why you dated the walking red flag that reminded you of home. Painful? Yes. Liberating? Even more so. Because once you see it, you can't unsee it. And with that awareness comes a new kind of power, the ability to choose differently. You might not be able to change everything at once, but you begin where all revolutions begin, within. You change the way you speak to yourself. You start noticing when your choices aren't aligned. You stop abandoning yourself to avoid disappointing others. And maybe just maybe, you'll find yourself laughing, dark, awkward, soul-deep laughter at how serious you used to take it all. The grind, the chase, the false urgency of the performance. Because in the end, spiritual awakening isn't about finding answers. It's about asking better questions, like, who am I without my achievements? Or, why does silence scare me? Or even, what if the meaning of life isn't something you earn, but something you remember? You've renounced your mask, stared into the abyss, and let the cringe wash over you like a metaphysical wave of expired soy milk. You'd think that would be enough to earn your spiritual merit badge by now, right? Wrong. Now comes the social fallout, the part where you realize your transformation isn't happening in a vacuum. It's happening while you're still on Earth, surrounded by people who knew and loved, or tolerated, the previous version of you. People who now look at you like you've joined a cult because you no longer want to argue about parking spots or The Bachelor. Welcome to sign number 3. People think you've joined a cult. Maybe you have. You try to explain it. You really do. You fumble through sentences like, I don't know, it's like I realized I'm not my thoughts, and time is a social construct, and people slowly begin to edge their chairs away from you like you just said the earth is flat and gravity is optional. They don't get it. You used to be so normal, so agreeable, so sure. I'll come to your wine and vision board night and pretend I care about your goals to open an Etsy for dog bandanas. But now, you stare blankly at group texts. You decline dinner invites without even faking a cough. You're becoming spiritually feral. And yes, people notice. Your friends accuse you of being distant. Your parents think you've joined some online guru cult. Even your dog starts acting confused when you sit quietly for longer than 10 seconds without doom scrolling. You try to explain that you're not isolating, you're integrating, but let's be honest, that sounds exactly like something someone says right before selling you essential oils and disappearing into a yurt. Here's the truth. When you change, it makes people uncomfortable, not because they're evil, but because it forces them to reckon with their own inertia. Your growth becomes a mirror, and not everyone likes what they see. Carl Jung said, the greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life of the parents. But what happens when you stop carrying that burden? When you say no to inherited dreams, you're not just changing your path, you're breaking an unspoken family contract. You stop talking about the weather and start talking about trauma patterns. You bring up emotional boundaries at brunch. You ask people how their soul is doing instead of their job. You've basically become that one eccentric aunt who only eats fermented foods and talks about shadow work at baby showers. Historians still argue whether spiritual awakenings were more accepted in ancient cultures due to community rituals, or whether even then, people were quietly side-eyeing their village mystics. Either way, modern society has no blueprint for your unraveling, so you end up looking like you're going through a midlife crisis at 27. Your old crew doesn't get you anymore. And new people? They either become obsessed with your weird calm glow or they label you as too intense. You learn quickly. Authenticity is magnetic, but it's also polarizing. Some will love you for it. Others will ghost you like you just confessed to being a lizard person. And yeah, part of you starts to wonder, am I actually in a cult? Because you've started using phrases like energy drain, alignment, and that no longer resonates with me. You've definitely thought about deleting all social media. You're drinking more tea than usual. And you've cried at least once in a forest. But here's the difference. You're not outsourcing your power. You're reclaiming it. Cults tell you what to think. Awakening teaches you how to think. Or rather, how to notice when you're not thinking at all, just reacting on autopilot. You stop blindly absorbing the emotional weather of the people around you. You start asking, is this mine? Or did I inherit this guilt, this fear, this habit? And the answers aren't always comfortable. You realize your chronic need to be liked is just childhood you trying not to get yelled at. That your hustle was a trauma response wearing a blazer. That your relationships were often codependency cosplay, two wounded people trying to emotionally babysit each other while calling it love. You're not becoming a different person. You're excavating the real one from under a pile of survival tactics and social scripts. But still, loneliness hits. Because even though you're evolving, your nervous system hasn't quite caught up. Your body misses the validation, the dopamine hits from being good or successful or needed. The ego mourns the identity it worked so hard to build. You'll be tempted to shrink again, to pretend you don't see what you see, to play the role that made everyone comfortable. Don't. Because that version of you, the agreeable, self-abandoning, productivity-obsessed version, it was killing your soul slowly, like spiritual carbon monoxide. And now that you've tasted real presence, even if it's laced with existential dread and way too many mushroom teas, you can't go back. So what do you do when your awakening makes you socially radioactive? You stay kind, but you stop performing. You speak your truth. Even when your voice shakes like a chihuahua on Red Bull, you let people go, not with bitterness, but with the silent understanding that their chapter in your book is over. And you find your new people, the ones who don't flinch when you say you feel energetically off, who talk about healing like it's normal, who won't gaslight you for needing quiet. They're out there. And yes, they probably own crystals, but they're not in a cult either. They're just people who decided to live with their eyes open, even when it hurts. Because once you've seen the truth, your truth, you can't unsee it. You stop trying to convince others. You stop trying to convert them. You just become the living proof that change is possible, even if it costs you the life you once thought you wanted. By now, you've ghosted half your friend group, gone through a mild identity implosion, and probably cried in a Trader Joe's parking lot because the seasonal candle oil felt too artificial. What's next? A robe and a mountain hut? Not quite. It's worse. You still have to go to work. Welcome to sign number 4. Reality still exists, and it's weird now. Here's the cosmic punchline. Even after all this unraveling, after you've peeled back the existential wallpaper and found your soul curled in the fetal position underneath, you still have bills. You still have chores. You still have to respond to that passive-aggressive email from Susan in accounting. Spiritual awakening doesn't delete your life. It just turns the brightness all the way up so you see it for what it really is, a looping stage play, full of glitchy actors, paper-thin props, and dialogue so repetitive you wonder if someone's trolling you. You wake up and everything looks off. The routine feels too scripted, the small talk too hollow. It's like your soul got HD vision and now it's looking around whispering, was it always this fake? You go to your job and realize the entire thing might be one giant stress-powered theater where everyone is pretending to care about metrics they don't understand for goals they don't believe in. You look at the quarterly reports and think, none of this matters. We are specks on a rock hurtling through the void, and Brad wants to optimize at engagement. And yet, there you are, in the Zoom meeting, smiling, nodding, secretly watching your own breakdown in the tiny camera preview box. Carl Jung knew this part well. He once said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But he never said it would come with Slack notifications and office birthday cupcakes. Because becoming yourself doesn't come with a sabbatical. It comes while you're still living the life you now barely recognize as yours. This is the awkward middle ground, no longer asleep, but not fully rebuilt. It's like you escaped the Matrix, but someone still expects you to show up to your dentist appointment at 2 p.m. Historians still argue whether ancient mystics had the luxury of stepping away from daily life, or if even they had to deal with livestock drama and social obligations. But in today's world, awakening happens between shifts, after school pickups, in the half hour before you finally respond to that one unread text from 6 days ago. It's not glamorous. It's grounding. And it's the part no one tells you about. You thought awakening would make you levitate. Instead, it made you hyper-aware of how absurdly disconnected we all are from the things that actually matter, like rest, or connection, or actual meaning. Now, you flinch at fake laughter. You get overwhelmed by malls. You feel nauseated by forced enthusiasm. You find yourself craving slowness, craving realness, craving nothing, just space, just silence. And yet, everything is still here. The chores, the traffic, the person at Starbucks who spells your name with 6 extra vowels. This is when you begin to understand a hard truth. Your environment didn't change. You did. And with that comes grief. You grieve the illusion. You grieve the autopilot. You even grieve how easy it was to care about shallow things, how comforting it was to be asleep and not know it. But here's the twist. This grief is not just about what you lost. It's about what you're starting to want. You want to feel things all the way through now. No more numbing. No more scrolling past your sadness or laughing over your loneliness. You're learning to be with it, to sit with it, to breathe into it until it becomes less scary and more sacred. You begin to re-enter life, but this time, barefoot. You notice weird little joys, how your tea smells in the afternoon sun, the sound of your neighbor's wind chimes, the way your body softens when you don't judge it. These small things become portals. And for the first time, you realize, you don't have to escape the world. You just have to stop abandoning yourself in it. Dark humor time? Okay, here it comes. Your spiritual awakening is basically like being given the Wi-Fi password to the universe, only to realize all your favorite apps are now useless. Everyone you know is still on 4G, and you're stuck explaining chakras to your Uncle Todd at Thanksgiving while reconsidering reincarnation just to not come back to this dinner table. And yet, you keep going. Because even though nothing's changed, everything has. You no longer move through the world trying to earn your place in it. You simply belong. Not because you're enlightened, but because you stopped outsourcing your truth. You begin to live differently. Maybe not louder, but deeper. You leave that conversation 5 minutes early because you notice your energy drop. You say no without apologizing, even when it makes people uncomfortable. You choose stillness over speed, sincerity over performance, presence over pleasing. Not because you're better than anyone, but because you finally know who you're not. You're no longer the projection, the puppet, the spreadsheet in human form. You are now the quiet observer, the curious questioner, the one who, despite all the pain, chose to wake up. And the best part? No one can take that from you. Even when you're still stuck in a job you don't love. Even when the world feels chaotic. Even when you're crying while folding laundry because you saw a photo of your childhood bedroom and it made your heart ache like a time traveler left behind, you still have your inner compass. And it points inward. Because awakening isn't a finish line. It's a rhythm. One you're learning to dance to. Even when the music sucks. Even when you're offbeat. Even when no one else hears it. You hear it now. And that changes everything.